Welcome to the Southbound Podcast, stories from influential leaders who are shaping the South. I'm your host, Patrick Reed from Blue Water Civil Design. And today's guest is Katherine O'Neill from One Spartanburg Inc., serving as the Chief Economic Development Officer. Thank you, Katherine, for being on board today.
Oh, well, thank you for inviting me. What a privilege to be here.
Yeah, no, this is great. I'm so excited to hear your stories and talk a little bit more about One Spartanburg Inc. Tell us, what do you do for One Spartanburg Inc. and a little bit about One Spartanburg Inc.
Sure. So first things first, we are the U.S. Chamber of the Year. What an amazing honor that was bestowed on Spartanburg.
Yes.
One Spartanburg Inc. is truly unique. I think there's only like 6 of us in the entire nation, where you have your traditional chamber activities, your tourism, so like your Convention Visitors Bureau, and then your economic development, recruitment, and retention kind of services all under one umbrella.
Yeah.
And my role, I'm over the economy division, so work a lot with industries and corporations who are looking to locate into Spartanburg.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, and congratulations on
thank you.
The well-deserved best chamber in the United States. Thank you so much for being on board as well. Tell us a little bit about where you grew up and how you got to Spartanburg.
It's an interesting journey.
Yeah.
So started out in Washington, D.C. My dad was a colonel in the Army, and he was stationed at the Pentagon for pretty much all of his tours. So I got to grow up in a place that's pretty magical. I know that as a kid, at least, it was magical to me.
Mm-hmm.
And ended up having the opportunity to go to Mary Washington College. It's a university now, but when I went, it was a pretty small college.
Right.
And my family moved south. So as a result of that, I ended up starting my first job in Darlington, South Carolina,
Right.
which I actually moved from Washington, D.C. to Bishopville, South Carolina, which was definitely a change, a lot slower,
Right.
a lot slower move to the whole day of life sort of thing. But in any event, worked for Darlington County for about 6.5 years.
And what time was that? What year was that when?
So this is going to date me now, I guess.
Oh, no. Yeah. But I'm curious to know what Bishopville and Darlington was like.
Oh, yeah.
30 years ago, 40 years ago. And anyway, so.
Yeah, I was just kidding about dating me. I don't mind sharing. But it was the end of the 1980s. So that was when the lizard man was actually had just been found in Bishopville. In fact, my grandfather was out in California and actually saw the news flash come across that the lizard man was found in Bishopville.
He came back out for the solar eclipse, right?
I think he did. But
Right.
kind of an exciting time in Bishopville. It was actually right before Hurricane Hugo.
Oh,
which,
wow.
That was it was an interesting time for that area of the state. Nobody thought a hurricane would go all the way to Charlotte, for heaven's sakes.
And the devastation behind it
yes.
as well.
So no power, no water, those types of things was my first introduction to hurricane season in South Carolina.
Yeah.
But so worked in Darlington in planning, which is really where my roots are. My undergraduate degrees in economics with a concentration in urban planning. And then, so I had a chance to really dive into that when I went to Darlington.
So what was, for planning for a rural county in town in South Carolina, what was, back then, obviously you were like, hey, we're here, come relocate here. But what were some things that you had to kind of like modernize or bring to them?
Oh, Patrick, we were really starting at the beginning there.
Mm-hmm.
The project that I was hired for was to install a 911 emergency system into Darlington County. And I really had no concept that everywhere didn't have 911 when I first came to South Carolina.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I can't recollect how there wasn't a
but
there was a time not too far in the distance that where some places in America, if you're hurt or in an emergency, there's no one to call.
Well, you could call like the sheriff's department or the town police, but there wasn't a way to identify where you were, which is where what 911 really brought to communities was the ability to call, and the responding agencies would know where you were. Well, in Darlington, they had rural route addresses. So if that's how you got your mail, was through a rural route address system.
Wow.
But you really can't send like an ambulance or a police officer to a mailing address. I mean, those were the days of having the mailboxes all kind of grouped together on the side of the road.
The old country road that had, several mailboxes, seen in little movies.
Yes. And Darlington needed roads to be named. There were a lot of names that people called roads, even sections of roads, but there were no road signs or anything like that. So we were really, really starting at the beginning. So I named over 2,000 roads in a collaborative effort with the community in trying to talk about, what would bring some historic significance perhaps to a road.
Yeah. And down here in the South, a lot of roads are named after people and other things. And I'm sure that there were some fights about, we got to make sure we name Uncle Bob because, but I mean,
that's a true story.
Yeah,
that's a true story. We had a blue ribbon road naming committee actually.
That's awesome.
That made decisions and kind of settled some fights over Hatfield and McCoy kind of, this road needs to be named after my family. But 2,000 roads were named and thousands of addresses had to be assigned. So that was really how I cut my teeth in local government and in planning, was to get out grassroots effort to get house numbers and road names and then help the county actually consolidate all of the dispatch for their emergency services. So before they had dispatch agencies in the different cities and in the county, and we brought them all into one agency. So I learned early on in my career about, how to bring folks together and the importance of that. It made a big impression on me.
Yeah. So after Darlington, where was kind of the next place that lured you to in economic development and planning?
Well, I had a great boss when I was in Darlington County, and really a mentor.
Yeah.
Jim Schaefer, he was the county administrator, and he encouraged me to get my master's degree. He told me that really for me to excel in local government, I needed to have a master's. And fortunately, the University of South Carolina had a Master of Public Administration program in place. They still do. It's a wonderful program, well respected. Yeah. So I commuted from Darlington to Columbia. This was back in the day when if you wanted to do any research with books that couldn't be checked out of the library, you actually had to have them sent to another university nearby. So I can tell you, I spent a lot of time at Francis Marion. They should be on my diploma also. I spent a lot of time there. They would send the reference books and other things I needed to Florence so that I could study there on the weekends and cut down on some of the trips.
Yeah. Wow. And that just another obstacle to go through to, now you can get your master's online in your own home, but you would have to travel to Columbia, travel to Francis Marion University.
I did.
Have books scheduled out and sent down there. That's amazing. And I'm sure that was tough. That wasn't easy.
Well, it was something that, you just have to get through, right? It was important to me to make sure that I got the education that I needed to further my career. And really as part of that and just my experience in Darlington County, I met Charlie Compton, who is just an amazing planner. He's a maverick in the world of planning, highly regarded throughout the nation. He had a position open up in his office that I ended up going to. He was in Lexington County.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So that was a little closer to USC, didn't have to quite do the shuffle of books for the weekend. But I worked for Charlie in his planning department. I was a development administrator.
Oh, cool.
So worked with a lot of that current planning where you help with subdivisions and other commercial projects in Lexington. And really at a time, so this would have been in like the mid-90s, at a time when Lexington was really starting to take off.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And so Mr. Compton was a maverick because he really focused on the way we did zoning.
Yes. So he was trained at Clemson, and was very familiar with Euclidean zoning, which is where you zone really the dirt that is below whatever the project is, right, or whatever the use is. But he and a group of other planners started talking about performance-based zoning. So this is back in the 70s and 80s, talking about how you could really help a community be good neighbors, right, through performance-based zoning, so that way you didn't really zone the dirt. You tried to encourage certain types of uses by how the buffers and setbacks and screening really work around a piece of property.
Right. It's not just the wild, wild west where it's like wherever you want to build, you can build it. You need some actual all right, we're going to put houses here and we're going to put industrial and commercial here and there. I mean, that's really, really important because you have schools, you have transportation and trade and all that and commerce. That's so important. Well,
it is because, and I really look at zoning as ways to help neighbors be good neighbors, whether it's industry or residential. Some people move out into the country and they don't like the smells and some of the other things that go along with agriculture. And then there are industries who move in and the houses don't really appreciate the noise and the light and things like this. So if you can get regulations in place that help each other, right? Help the residential and industrial kind of work together as good neighbors by trying to shield the light away from residences, for example, and cut down the noise through berming, things like that.
That's all. There's a lot of that stuff that has to be considered before a new construction, a new build, a new development occurs. So well, that's awesome. So. Walk me through, you're in Lexington and learned a lot under Charlie Compton. When did Spartanburg knock on your door and give you a call to say, hey, we'd like for you to come up here?
Well, there were 17 years there in Lexington, where I went from being in the planning department to human resources to the assistant county administrator and then to county administrator. Wow. So I had a wonderful, wonderful experience in Lexington County. Great group of county council members to work with, a phenomenal staff. They were terrific. And we had some wonderful announcements while I was there. Nephron, for example, Nephron Pharmaceuticals announced while I was there.
Wow.
Amazon came to Lexington while I was the county administrator. Expansions at Michelin, those types of things were very exciting.
And that's before Amazon was Amazon it is today.
Yes. Those
I remember when I first learned about Amazon, I was like, what is this? I thought this was just books, but.
Yeah, they were really teed up to become something pretty remarkable. In fact, I didn't realize it at the time. It kind of came out as we were going through the negotiations with Amazon that they were actually going to put 2 locations in South Carolina, one in Lexington and one in Spartanburg, where I ended up going later in my career.
Yeah.
So really a wonderful time to be in Lexington. And I got a telephone call from Spartanburg asking if I would be interested in applying for the county administrator's position. And after a 4-hour interview with Spartanburg County Council, where we talked about a lot, it was really clear to me that I could have an impact in Spartanburg and they would be a great group to work with.
Yeah.
And
evidence of it with being named Chamber of the Year in 2020.
Absolutely. And the economic development growth in Spartanburg after the recession, which is when I came to Spartanburg in late 2011 was when it was announced that I would be coming as county administrator. And all indications were that Spartanburg was really on the cusp of something amazing. Of course, BMW being in Spartanburg is amazing in and of itself.
Oh, yeah, correct.
But really cool stuff was...
There's more to come.
Yes, on the horizon.
So you get to Spartanburg right at kind of the towards the end of the recession, but you're kind of picking up the ashes a little bit of what happened.
Yeah, it was a tough time in South Carolina during the recession. Lots of housing had occurred in South Carolina and in Spartanburg. A lot of subdivisions had been started. The housing market in general across the United States was a bit of a train wreck with all of the mortgages and things like that. So we didn't really know when the recession would end. Nobody did. Right. But there was some sense that perhaps we were seeing the end of it. And, I started to notice in Spartanburg as I was researching the county before I came that it felt like the commercial business license, the commercial building permits, that they were still really steady during the recession in Spartanburg, which is an interesting indicator of things to come.
Yes.
Right. But it was a tough time for Spartanburg. There had the Cleveland Park train accident had just occurred earlier that year.
I remember that.
It was a hard time for Spartanburg. That was a dark time where, there had been a child had died as a result of that accident. A number of folks had been hurt. There was some financial challenges at Spartanburg, and never to be one to back down from an opportunity or a challenge, depending on which side of the glass that you're on, right?
Sure.
It was a good time for me to come to Spartanburg and to work with county council to see what we could put together to head in the right direction.
That's wonderful. Well, we're going to take a quick break and come right back. The Southbound Podcast is sponsored by Blue Water Civil Design. Blue Water Civil Design is a professional civil engineering firm located in Greenville, South Carolina, serving the southeastern United States and beyond. Started in 2010, the firm is bound together by 4 founding professional engineers with more than 100 years combined experience in all aspects of civil site work engineering, land planning, site selection, and analysis. For more information, please visit us at bluewatercivil.com. Welcome back to the Southbound Podcast. I am Patrick Reed, your host, and today's guest is Katherine O'Neill with One Spartanburg Inc. Thank you for sharing your stories, Katherine. Really enjoyed hearing about how you got to Spartanburg, but I want to take it back for a second and talk about growing up in Washington, D.C. How does one, grow up in Washington, D.C., and why were you in Washington, D.C.? I think that's an interesting story I'd like to hear.
Well, it really goes back to my dad. And I know we've talked a lot about just my experience getting to the South and really following my family. But my dad was a colonel in the Army, as I mentioned earlier, stationed at the Pentagon, and he was a single parent. So it was my sister and I growing up with my dad. And I have very distinct memories of getting to go to work with my dad at the Pentagon, right?
Really cool.
We didn't have babysitters back then or daycares that you could go to. If I had a day off from school and my dad had to work, I went with him to work in the Pentagon, which, that's pretty cool.
That's pretty cool. I mean, not everyone gets to say that. I've never even been to the Pentagon.
Well, this was pre 9/11 too, so I probably got away with a lot of stuff that you can't get away with now. But I remember distinctly being at my dad's desk and him saying, "Oh, look, I've run out of paper clips. Will you go to the office supply and get me paper clips?" And cool. I knew that path. The fellow who was in charge of supplies knew me by name, and I'd show up, get paper clips, and come back. And
I'm sure that made his day too. Seeing a cute little girl walk up.
He'd get to see me a lot because when I'd get back, about 5 minutes later, my dad would break a pencil or need a pen or something. So I ran for office supplies a lot. But so cool. It really gave me a very unique opportunity and a memory of our nation's capital. But it didn't really stop there. My dad was an avid reader and a scholar in his own right. I mean, he knew 5 languages.
Oh my gosh.
Fluently. And he thought that was really being lazy because his dad knew 7 languages. My dad was first generation in the United States. Wow. My family on his side is from Czechoslovakia.
Okay. Oh, wow.
So as you can imagine, with someone who is that scholarly, one of the things that he made my sister and I do is if we were doing book reports or any type of research, we had to cite the Smithsonian. So this is no joke. This is no joke at all.
Go to the Smithsonian?
Yes. Not only go to the Smithsonian, but I was the nerd in the class that had to go to the teacher and ask, how do you cite the Smithsonian, right? And I was back in the... As in, that's where I found my information. Exactly. It had to be a source. My dad didn't care how many other sources I had, but I had to source the Smithsonian somehow. My sister and I did. So that was back in the days of the old Polaroid cameras too.
Oh, wow.
So I couldn't take my phone and snap a shot, right? I'd have to go get my film developed. So one time, for example, I did a report on the Hope Diamond. So I got to go and take a picture of it. I don't even know if they let you do that anymore because of security or things like that. Right. But here I was, right, in elementary school taking pictures of things that I could see, cool. Right? And
you were reporting on this.
I was. Yeah. I was. So cool. And at the time, I thought that was terrible. But now looking back on it, I wonder how many other people have that experience. I mean, that was a real treasure now for me. Yeah. I also thought that every community had the Smithsonian in it. So moving to Bishopville, that was a bit of a harsh reality that they don't have the Smithsonian there.
Well, but I also think that having that as your main source of reference gave you something of a unique perspective of American history and where we've been of a lot of the different culture and all the things that have occurred in the past 47 years. But that's awesome. That's really cool and really neat. So,
it was.
So did your father make you do this?
Yes, it was his requirement. But he also introduced me to people over the years. At the time, it didn't make a big impression on me, but I had lots of interactions with senators and congressmen and other folks that were inside the Beltway in Washington. Yeah. The deputy secretary of CIA lived across from us in Maryland. The deputy secretary or the undersecretary of agriculture lived next door to us, and we were in Virginia. So policymakers and decision makers were all around me when I was growing up.
Wow.
And my dad, I didn't really know what my dad did. I mean, trust me, I knew that my dad worked for the Army, he worked for Defense Intelligence, but, he was always telling me that's classified. So, I would never know. I mean, even into his 80s, my dad wouldn't say anything. He thought for sure that the KGB was still listening, right? But, he took that very seriously, and I get it. Right. I get it. It wasn't really until after he passed away that I truly understood the things that my dad was involved in. When he died, one of his only wishes was to be buried at Arlington National Cemetery. And it was interesting how that all kind of came into place. For example, when you pass away, you don't automatically just go straight to a funeral at Arlington National Cemetery. I mean, it's like a year later.
Yeah. It's a process. It's not, just like, we got to get.
It doesn't happen 3 days later like most funerals.
Sure.
So we had to wait. And what turned out to be really ironic, and I think a little bit of divine intervention, is that you don't pick the burial plot either.
Right.
And my dad's burial plot ended up being right on the other side of the Roslyn Bridge, looking at the Pentagon on the side where he worked.
Oh, wow.
I mean, he spent decades in the Pentagon and has been laid to rest now, looking out over it. Yeah. It was a very emotional ceremony for my sister and I. It was a full military honors. The Joint Chief of Staff was represented. Oh my God. It was, not to get emotional, but it was, you can't have someone in your family buried at Arlington National Cemetery without it being emotional. I'm so proud of him. He was an amazing soldier.
That's an amazing story because, you don't, like you said, you don't really get that opportunity for everyone who has served because there's a limited capacity. But to hear that he was not only buried there, but also in a spot where he's overlooking the Pentagon, where he spent so many years, that's such an amazing. And then obviously there's a lot of high-ranking officials that were there as well.
Oh, it was. Excuse me. No, a little emotional. Absolutely. My dad. My sister and my dad both lived in South Carolina. That was part of my story of why I'm here. His final years were at the Veterans Victory House in Walterboro, South Carolina, which it's an amazing facility. The respect and treatment that they do of veterans is unparalleled. And I'm so grateful for everything that was done. And I'm also grateful to a few other people who made my dad's life, to him especially, and then, to us after he passed away, seemed very special. Representative Eddie Talon, he's since left the state legislature, but he had the South Carolina flag flown over the State House actually the day that my dad passed away. He had no way of knowing that it would happen that way.
Yeah.
But it did.
But right.
And
That's
then
amazing.
Trey Gowdy, he's amazing anyway.
Right,
Trey Gowdy is. But he had the American flag flown over the Pentagon for my dad. In fact, they his staff said that they've never gotten that request before. It's always been like the Capitol or the White House, never the Pentagon. But thought that was pretty special for my dad.
Special. Yeah,
and there was a really cool Marine that I have to bake into the story.
Yeah.
Colonel Don Ravel. He's actually from Spartanburg. And when the request came over from Trey Gowdy to fly the flag over the Pentagon, he's like, oh, I'm from Spartanburg. Let me do this. What an awesome guy, right? So he's a very decorated military hero anyway. But to do this for us as our family, we were so grateful. In fact, he came to Spartanburg and presented it to us and came to my dad's funeral. There's so many special people in my life, but that whole group, Eddie Talon, Trey Gowdy, and Colonel Don Ravel, I'm very grateful for what they did to honor my dad.
That's amazing. That's awesome. What a true hero too.
Yes.
And I think that, to give some kudos to your father, I think that he did a great job in preparing a fine person. And
well, thank you.
I think it set the motion for you to be fearless in taking on this job in Spartanburg when you did in 2011.
Well, if you think I'm fearless, you need to meet my sister. She's a lot cooler than I am.
No, yeah. I'll take that challenge. But you're moving into Spartanburg at a time where it's an uphill climb. I think that your background in having to use the Smithsonians as resources, and then growing up with a father that was highly decorated and highly honored, and then your experience in going through rural South Carolina to set you forth in the path to arrive in Spartanburg when they needed someone like you the most. And
well, you're very kind.
And obviously when Spartanburg One Inc. has been named the U.S. The best chamber of commerce in the United States in 2020, that's a great feat, and congratulations.
Oh, well, thank you. I work with an amazing group of professionals, right? This is for sure. I have been blessed with every place I've gone to work with very talented individuals and recruit talented individuals to work with me when I was county administrator in Lexington and then again in Spartanburg. Very talented public servants.
Yeah.
And One Spartanburg Inc., though, I've got to tell you, is probably the most energetic, outgoing, amazing group of professionals I've ever been with.
Yeah.
I'm one of the older ones, too, so the rest have a lot more energy than I do. And a lot of credit goes to Alan Smith as the president and CEO. He really challenged us to go after those things that were important for our community, which then we were recognized for to be Chamber of the Year. We have a great group of community leaders that work with us as well. But really, it's the community's vision that we've been entrusted with, and it's our privilege and honor to do what we do. That's
awesome. So, yeah, and I tell you what, the energy is totally there because, you guys do a lot of outreach and have made a huge noise across the upstate of again, Spartanburg was not really kind of this place that was known or sought after and didn't have a lot of noise. And then all of a sudden it's one of the loudest. It is the loudest county in the upstate.
I think so.
And in a good way.
Yes.
As it should be. But I want to take one step backwards real quick. We talked a little bit about your father. I want to maybe talk a little bit about some other mentors in your life that were kind of influential in your life and your path to One Spartanburg Inc.
So I mentioned Jim Schaefer. He was very instrumental. He knew my dad.
Oh, cool.
Right. Yeah. So my dad, this is so you wouldn't be surprised by me telling you this, but my dad actually went to meet with him early on, like very early on after I was hired. and was basically, you're going to take care of my daughter, right? And that like,
I like it.
going to get the job done sort of thing.
Yes,
like you're in charge right now and I'm counting on you sort of thing. So Jim did a wonderful job with really setting the stage for me and challenging me to go get my master.
Okay.
And then when I got to Lexington, I worked with wonderful individuals, county council members, Billy Derrick and Johnny Jeffcoat, Bill Banning, who has since passed away, just really took me under their arm and said, look, this is what you need to do, and help me to make good decisions and to teach me how to be patient, right?
And that's really important because, I'm doing a lot of things where I'm making decisions and, I'm getting some, evaluations back, and people are trying to help me think things the way that they think so that I'm able to make those better decisions. I think that we're always under someone's wing in that way, but so I didn't mean to interrupt you, but.
Oh, well, really, I mean, patience is a virtue, right? Yes. And when you're young, especially in the roles that I was in, although I didn't recognize it at the time, I was being thrust into leadership positions when I was very young. And for me, I felt like I was impatient. I wanted to see progress. I wanted to see things happening. Yeah. And having those mentors in my life in Darlington and Lexington to teach me the value of patience really set me up well when I came to Spartanburg, because I needed to understand more about Spartanburg in order to help make some of the changes that we needed to do. Change doesn't happen overnight.
No, right.
All these sayings, right?
Well, and you think about it, like when you're young, you want to make an impact early on, and you want to show your influence, and so to be impatient is completely normal. But at the same time, when you're in a leadership position, you can steer the ship in the wrong direction and it not be successful. And obviously this paid off for you.
Well, I wanted to get it right in Spartanburg. This is really my last stop. My husband and I have a farm in Spartanburg that we absolutely love. Our family loves it.
Yeah.
I don't want to move again.
Yeah.
I was fortunate in being in the military as a military family that we didn't move all over the world. I can tell you that I was a little jealous of that when I was growing up, because I heard about all these wonderful stories of people living all over the world, and I'd lived in Washington, D.C. But now that I've gotten a little older, setting down some roots somewhere really feels good.
Right.
So I want to get it right in Spartanburg. I want this to be what I'm known for. Really not necessarily a legacy, right? Because I think I'm young enough now to have still, right?
Yeah,
the older you get, the younger you feel, by the way.
Right. Yeah. That's awesome.
But in Spartanburg, the opportunities are so different than they were for me in Lexington or Darlington. The table is being set in Spartanburg. There's a group of very thoughtful leaders, and I'm really fortunate and privileged to be part of a group of very, again, talented people who want to do the right thing for Spartanburg and to really make it white hot for development and to make it authentic. Right? I mean, a lot of people talk about, well, why can't Spartanburg be more like Greenville, or why can't it be more like Asheville or Charlotte?
Right.
I don't think Spartanburg wants to be like any other community. I think Spartanburg wants to be Spartanburg, and they're true to their roots. They're very authentic.
Yeah.
And lucky me, I've been there for 10 years now. And I feel like I'm part of the community, that I've been accepted as one of the long timers, right? And can influence what the future looks like.
And that you have. I want to give you credit there as well. But I wanted to also maybe ask if there are some other mentors and women that also were a part of your life. Because I know we talked about your father and some other mentors, but I know that, in our discussions that, there's some women that have done some incredible things for you as well.
Yes. So as I was coming up, and it may not be that way today, I'm trying not to let it be that way for the next generation of women coming behind me. But when I was growing up, there weren't very many women in positions of leadership. That's not to say that there weren't any, but there weren't as many as there are now. I was the first female county administrator in Lexington, first female county administrator in Spartanburg.
Wow.
I mean, there aren't very many female county administrators in the state of South Carolina, period.
Right.
So, for me, I want to change that with the women who I'm with, like at One Spartanburg or at the county or in Spartanburg. I have to say though, because I will get back to women in my life, but I have to say that when I came to Spartanburg, there were a couple of folks who really stepped up to be mentors for me when I really needed it. I needed to understand Spartanburg and I needed to learn more about business because the volume of economic development in Spartanburg is so different than any place that I've been, right? There's so much activity, which I know we're going to get to at some point in this interview. But so early on, of course, on county council, I had Jeff Horton, who was an amazing county council chairman and became a friend of mine through the process. We went through some tough stuff early on. Really, the whole time I was there, there were significant challenges for Spartanburg. And I can't thank Jeff enough for sticking with it with me and helping me to understand the best way for me to respond. And this interview would be absolutely, it would be a complete oversight if I didn't talk about the relationship that I have with David Britt. So David is the chairman of economic development and recruitment on Spartanburg County Council, the longest serving county council member, been on over 3 decades. And of course, now in the role that I'm in, I work regularly with David on negotiating economic development deals and working with companies. And David has taught me so much about how to approach industry and the things that are important and how to help industries not only prosper in Spartanburg, but expand and to bring others to Spartanburg. He's an absolute amazing economic development engine in and of himself. He's a force of nature in economic development.
He was recently awarded the Order of the Palmetto. He
was. And what was interesting is so many people, including myself, thought that he had already, years ago, received the Order of Palmetto, and he hadn't. So, David doesn't even stop at Spartanburg, and he's helping the state of South Carolina. And I'm so grateful that he's helped me as a mentor because he's helped me with personal questions that I've had and right through, how do we land this deal? So he's been wonderful, introduced me to a lot of folks, including introducing me to George Dean Johnson, who is an amazing story in and of himself. In and of itself, he's amazing. The fact that he's taken time with me and helped me to understand the consequences of some of the decisions I needed to make and guided me in the right direction, I will always be grateful for that. And Bill Barnett. You can't talk about Spartanburg without talking about Bill Barnett, former mayor. And I guess mentor, yes. And Bill has challenged me. He's challenged me to remain authentic and to find that grit when I really needed it. I don't think anybody walks away from Bill Barnett without having a list of things to do either. So he's kept me challenged. But having all of those folks in my life, especially in Spartanburg, at that time in my career, really helped me with shaping my own thoughts about how I could help Spartanburg where it needed it the most. And opened a lot of doors for me. But back to your question about women in my life, 2 women really rise to the surface in this part of my career as being role models and folks women specifically, who I want to be more like. And that's Karen Calhoun with McMillan, Paston Smith. Talk about a force of nature. Now she's just full of energy and positive, just a real positive outlook. And she introduced me to Nancy Whitworth. And Nancy, former economic development director for the city of Greenville. 40 years. She must have started when she was 10.
She's amazing. I loved our episode with her on the podcast.
I'm so glad you interviewed her.
But like you said, though, 40 years in the same position, but also economic development and in a position where it's like there weren't a lot of females. So.
No, there haven't been, still aren't a lot of women in economic development. So Nancy has been, of course, she helps One Spartanburg. She's in an advisory capacity, which is how I've gotten to know her. And I've been blessed with a friendship in addition to a lot of really great advice, but 2 very polished professional women who have carved out amazing things over the course of their career and really put their stamp on the future of the upstate. And of course, both of them have been involved beyond just the upstate. Just amazing women.
Well, I'll say that we recently renovated our house, and I give all the credit to my wife. So I think women, and my mom did. My mom, it raised me, and I think that women do a great job in building houses and building a community. And I think that that's one thing that, giving credit to that and acknowledging that it's, can't do one without the other. And I think that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
Well, let's take a quick break and we'll come right back. Thank you. Welcome back to the Southbound Podcast. I am Patrick Reed, your host, and today's guest is Katherine O'Neill. Thank you for being on, Katherine. I've really enjoyed hearing your stories.
Well, I've enjoyed talking with you. Thank you for having me on your show.
Absolutely. So in our previous discussions, you were telling me a little bit about a small town in Virginia, Fredericksburg, and how you had a plan. So this isn't the first time that you've come to a city where it's arriving. So tell us a little bit about Fredericksburg.
Oh, I had a wonderful opportunity while I was at Mary Washington College to do an internship with the city of Fredericksburg in their planning department. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that I really realized the enormity of the project that I was on at the time. I mean, I was 18, 19 years old. I mean, you don't really recognize a lot at that point in your career.
Right.
But they wanted to do a commuter train from Washington, D.C. to Fredericksburg. Mm-hmm. And everybody thought that was absolutely crazy, right? Because Fredericksburg's more than an hour, probably an hour and a half south of Washington. Mm-hmm. And although I actually did know people who worked with my dad who lived out, they lived in Locust Grove outside of Fredericksburg.
And they took the train every day.
Well, they drove because there was no train.
Right. Okay,
and here we were doing a study for it, and people thought we were crazy. But you know what? They built that train. I was just fortunate enough to be at the right place at the right time to be part of that study.
Yeah.
And one of the most incredible gifts I've ever been given was when Lexington County Council needed to go to Washington, D.C., and I was going to travel with them. And they'd heard me talk about this story and asked me, do you want to stay in Fredericksburg and take the train in? The train that you worked on, would you like to actually ride it into Washington? And I was thrilled. I mean, brought to tears over something that was as sweet and touching and generous as that. So I got to ride that train that everybody else, I mean, I guess you could call it a crazy train, right? But everybody else thought that was just absolutely crazy to think that big. And, here I am in Spartanburg, in a community that has set the table for very thoughtful and amazing growth for the community and success.
Yeah, and the big ideas that people wouldn't imagine would be able to kind of think about and actually have that conversation.
Yes. Well, wasn't so long ago. There was actually a campaign for Spartanburg that were big billboards that said Spartanburg with a question mark. And it was like, yes, Spartanburg. Well, I can tell you, yes, Spartanburg right now. I mean, we have so much interest in Spartanburg, not just from companies that want to and have faith in Spartanburg to make their investment, beyond the really big ones like BMW and Milliken and Michelin, who have really set the stage for Spartanburg's success. So grateful for what they brought to Spartanburg, but new companies like Oshkosh Defense and Paul Corporation and TTI. I mean, just this year, we've had over $1.5 billion worth of investment from companies, just those three, to name a few, that are locating in Spartanburg because they know what we've always known about Spartanburg, that it is an authentic community and that it does have great positioning, right? So it's affordable.
Right.
There's job opportunities. It's close to the beach, close to the mountains. I mean, it's perfectly positioned on two interstates, halfway between New York and Miami, has the inland port. I mean, so many things going for it.
Right. No, and I think we said that Spartanburg is kind of part of the heartbeat between the Charlotte corridor.
Yes.
And the table set, the growth is coming and has come. I think one thing that I love how you said it, Spartanburg is no longer outperforming in its weight class. It's performing above, and then there's still more to come.
Yes, we're setting our sights on communities that we thought were aspirational for so long, we're actually now in that class. So let's use some examples. And if by the time that this podcast actually airs, you will know the answers to who Project Host and Project Blue Sky are in Spartanburg. Right. But let's just talk about them.
Sure.
So Project Host is moving 76 employees into downtown Spartanburg, into the Montgomery building. These are knowledge-based professional positions who wanted to be in downtown Spartanburg because they saw it as an emerging community. Right. They had choices. They were looking at Atlanta, looking at Greenville, looking at Columbia, and they chose Spartanburg. Yeah. And I'm very grateful to their CEO and his commitment to Spartanburg and how he saw that move as helping him with his play for talent, that if he could recruit better by being in downtown Spartanburg, that would help his company. And his answer is absolutely yes. Wow. So, and you'll learn about that company. It is an established company that is in a growth mode right now that is just absolutely crushing it.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you think if any company is to add 76 employees to its downtown, I mean, all the economic development that comes out, those people are going to go to retail, restaurants. And
That's right.
And they're going to live close by. And I mean, it all kind
That's right.
It's a huge impact.
That's right. But hold your hat, because Project Blue Sky is even bigger. So Project Blue Sky is based in Austin, Texas, and they chose Spartanburg too. And they were looking in communities that were much bigger than us and really appreciated what Spartanburg brought to the table. And there's a whole list of things that they shared with us. The community engagement. The community college stepped up and helped us to create a soft landing spot for Project Blue Sky months, practically a year ahead of schedule. So shout out to Dr. Makota and his team, because they're amazing. Mike Forrester and the rest of the team there pulled it off to bring Project Blue Sky in. So they're starting out with 25 employees, but hold your hat, they'll be at 50 by the first quarter of 2022, 150 by the end of the year. And their 5-year projection is 450 to 500 employees in Spartanburg. So I'm
450 employees?
Yes. So I am crazy about this company. I think the CEO is amazing. Just what they're doing right now in the tech industry is remarkable anyway. But the fact that they're going to let us grow with them is such a privilege.
Absolutely. That's amazing. So I love this because, let's go back real quick to Spartanburg being where it was when you got there. And, Spartanburg people would talk about, we're going to Charlotte and Chattanooga and Knoxville and Greenville and Austin, Texas, because we like those places and we admire them. Now, Spartanburg is competing for businesses relocating there. And you're competing against those cities.
Yes. And my goal is to be, when another community is talking about going to Austin or Nashville or Chattanooga or a place like that they say, and we need to stop at Spartanburg too. Oh, right. Wow. So we're going to get there. We're well on our way. Right. The developer interest and the private equity interest in Spartanburg is unprecedented. Right. So in the industrial side, we've been seeing, and I don't want to jinx Spartanburg by talking about this, right? Knock on wood. But, the industrial investment has been phenomenal since the recession. So today, as we sit here today, we have over 9.5 million square feet of industrial spec space, either coming out of the ground or in the pipeline. Wow. That's remarkable. For a community the size of Spartanburg, that is performing above your weight class by anybody's standard.
By anyone's standard,
But you know what is equally, if not more amazing, is that we have the private equity that is looking at downtown Spartanburg, and developers who are looking at downtown Spartanburg is unprecedented. Yes. So very fortunate to have the city council that we have in Spartanburg and county council. They're working together great.
Right.
And that's something that you don't find that everywhere, right?
That's right.
You have folks that get into those positions and they don't get along well. That's not the case in Spartanburg.
Yeah.
They're working collaboratively. We're very fortunate at One Spartanburg Inc. to be part of that collaboration with them.
Right.
But it goes beyond that. It's the community college, it's the utilities, it's everyone oaring together to try to make good decisions and to have things ready when growth is going to come, and being ready for the growth that does come so that it doesn't change Spartanburg into something that we don't, as a community, don't want.
It's grow smart, grow wise, and do it the right way. If you ever go to downtown Spartanburg now, you look at it and you go, this place has come a long ways. One, two, it still has that home feel where you go to some mom and pop places that have kind of been there as cemented. But it also just, you look around, you go, this place has got some good bones.
Yes, a really good vibe too.
Right. And the vibe, yes.
Right. So trying to, maintain that character that it has right now and mix that with, more modern development and trying to get that density downtown, right? So the city has worked so hard to make sure that when the developers who are now here are working on bringing more multifamily housing to downtown and more mixed use, that they were ready for that. One of the things that I really want to give a shout out to the city council over is their determination to make sure that they reserve affordable housing, workforce housing for these projects.
So important.
Right? So these projects that are coming in have to have at least 10% workforce housing included in their projects. Just floating workforce housing. If you and I lived in the same apartment complex and I was workforce housing and you weren't, we wouldn't know.
Yeah. And that's right. It needs to look like the same as it doesn't need to look different. Ooh, you live in that building, so I know who you are. Like it needs to look the same in uniform.
That's exactly right.
Else.
That's exactly right. And city council is committed to it. The developers who are coming to Spartanburg are committed to it. They really appreciate the fact that the city is concerned about how that's going to grow with the city, that there's places that people can afford to live in downtown. Yeah. So it's very intentional.
That's good.
So we're starting to see more and more of that. So stay tuned. There's more to come on that. Very exciting projects. And I'm so grateful for the investments that are being made, both by individuals who are in Spartanburg today and by individuals who are new to the market but have fallen in love with Spartanburg.
Right. Spartanburg is an amazing place. And real quick, I do want to, besides being the 2021 U.S. Chamber of the Year, Spartanburg has been recently named the 24th best place to live in the U.S.
Number one in South Carolina on that same one.
Yes. Number one in South Carolina.
That's right.
15 best performing cities in the U.S. 9th coolest town in America. And 4th in economic strength nationwide. That is very impressive.
Well, lots of work there on Spartanburg County Council's part and the team that I work with. I'm very fortunate to have a team that can really, drop the hammer when you need to and just grind through getting these projects into Spartanburg. A couple of other accolades that were there is like I'm looking at the sheet too with you, but the world's greatest modern art where you least expect to find it. I mean, that was from Forbes looking at Spartanburg and saying, we're different. And it's someplace that you could enjoy living and spending, quality time. Right.
And the quality of life is awesome as well. And I do love the fact that where you're saying that, one thing about Spartanburg is we'll get in the boat and oar with you. And I mean, it's so true. It's, if you go to Spartanburg, the feeling is if you're working there, they're going to, everyone's all hands on deck. Everyone's coming out of their shops and their retail. And it's like, you're here now, what can we do to help you? And that's always been the feeling that I get when I work with people in Spartanburg.
Well, I was just with the project this morning where we were talking about the difference in Spartanburg.
Yes.
That, any community can do some of the things that we do, but I think we do it better.
Yeah.
Right. So, we work as a team to try to work through the development process so that you don't take months going through the permitting process. The team at Spartanburg County has pre-development review meetings and works hard to make sure that the projects get through the review process and can start to under construction. I mean, we want to take companies to where they're not spending money, that they're making money. Right.
Yeah.
And then things like the talent relocation and incentive package that One Spartanburg Inc.'s board has approved, where we'll help companies with relocating talent to Spartanburg. Companies that are coming from Europe, for example, that want to bring their team here, we'll help get them here.
Yeah. Do you have a success story about the relocation?
So, yes. So remember we were talking about Project Blue Sky?
Yes.
So they, the CEO asked us if we would help with the recruitment of one of their team members. And he hadn't been to Spartanburg before. So we really wanted to show him what Spartanburg was all about. So our president and CEO, Alan Smith, who I mentioned earlier, he does a great job with taking executives around who are looking at relocating to Spartanburg, taking them around and showing them neighborhoods. He'll even show them property out in the country, introduce them to superintendents, to principals, to clergy members, whatever the candidate may be interested in, answering a lot of questions for them. Yeah. And he did that for Project Blue Sky's candidate. And we had a great dinner, answered a bunch of questions for him, and he said yes. And that was, this was a big deal for this company. And we told him, look, we're going to put not only our best foot forward, but the real foot forward. We're going to tell him the good about Spartanburg and the things that we're still working on. Yeah, so it was a very honest and genuine conversation. And he appreciated that. Yeah. And better yet, though, he said yes.
Exactly. And I'm sure he's there to also, he wants to plant himself and contribute and help and get in he's going to learn to get in the boat and oar with you.
Yes.
Yeah. That's amazing. I want to get to something though that I think is really, really interesting, that you discovered that you are a descendant of a Polish pianist and composer.
Yes. So this would be my grandmother's great uncle, if I have the tree right.
Yeah, right.
Ignacy Paderewski, who was a Polish war hero. He actually was the first prime minister for Poland. Wow. He signed the Treaty of Versailles, which is, ended World War I.
Ended World War I, and we have Veterans Day that we honor in name. It used to be Armistice Day. Now it's Veterans Day. But yes. And so he signed the Treaty of Versailles.
He did.
So that's, wow.
Yeah, a pretty amazing person in and of himself. I mean, he was for a free Poland before it was cool to be for a free Poland. Right. And he actually came to the United States and did concerts where he sent money back to Poland to help free Poland. Yeah. And my grandmother's brother actually took, when he passed away, he left his heart in the United States and gave specific instructions on when it was to be taken back to be buried. And my grandmother's brother actually flew on US 1 and took his heart back to Poland. Oh, wow. Which, I can't play the piano I can't even carry a tune, but I feel like there's a little part of both his fire and tenacity and my dad's commitment, and dedication and determination and discipline, all that kind of came to me genetically. At least I hope so.
It's proven. To me, it's proven. And I think that if you think about it, he had a love for a country, and he fought for what he believed was right, even before it was, he was standing by himself in a sense. And I think that, that has become evident with you and your tenacity and working to get to where we are today with One Spartanburg Inc., Spartanburg and his community. Last thing I want to talk about, though, is you're a beekeeper.
Oh, yes, I am.
Real quick. Tell us a bit about that real quick, a quick story, and then we can maybe wrap it up.
Absolutely. So I have an amazing husband, and we really haven't talked about him yet, and he's a big part of my story.
Right.
So I'd even consider my husband a mentor. He's a lot smarter than I am. It has helped me through some really tough decisions I've had to make over the course of my career. But we started talking about beekeeping. We're gardeners, and we wanted to see if pollination would change the outcome of our garden. And we love flowers, things like that. We have a greenhouse. So we ended up becoming beekeepers. So we're actually certified beekeepers. And I can tell you that the volume of vegetables, if you were to interview other people in Spartanburg, they're probably going to talk to you about okra and peppers and potatoes that have come out of our garden, because once I cry uncle, I'm carrying it all into Spartanburg, like my own farmer's market, handing it out, right? To all of my friends. But it's been wonderful. Beekeeping, although people talk about, being afraid of bees stinging you and things like that, yes, you get stung. But it really is something that helps you to decompress, right? That's all. That's all you think about. Yes,
therapeutic. Yeah.
And I never realized how smart they are, and working together as a colony to try to make decisions and to collaborate, if that's such a thing that insects can do. I also never thought that I would buy an insect for $20 and put it in my pocket to keep it warm, right, to bring it home. But I've done that for queen bees to bring them back to our apiary. But we actually have a honey company.
Wow.
Now, if my husband listens to this podcast, I want to go ahead and say what I know he would say. We haven't sold a single drop yet, because even though we're a honey company, we don't have an approved label yet to sell our honey. But I've given away a bunch, probably more than my husband knows I've given away.
We can edit that out.
But in any event, I mean, it's been a wonderful experience for us. And
well, it sounds, to me, I love just to tie things together, but how you were talking about how incredibly smart bees are and how much they work together as a colony. And it's, again, I think it's threaded throughout Spartanburg. That whole mantra that we want you here, we're performing way above what we were expected, and there's still more to come.
Yes.
And getting in the boat and rowing with you is just the mantra, and that's amazing. So anyway, I just wanted to tie that in real quick.
Yes.
But that's pretty amazing.
Well, I think that the die was cast for Greenville and Spartanburg when they both were developing side by side, right? So Spartanburg or Greenville will never be a Charlotte or an Atlanta that grows up as one city with one nucleus.
Right.
But I think that Spartanburg has really arrived on the scene, and that you're going to see some amazing things happen in Spartanburg. My prediction. So we'll look back on this podcast 5 years from now and see whether I had a crystal ball or not. But I really think there's going to be some spectacular things and amazing things come out of Spartanburg that's going to contribute to the upstate and contribute 100%. To Greenville and Spartanburg being like our areas, Raleigh, Durham, or Dallas, Fort Worth. I mean, I'm not necessarily talking about in size, but just in quality.
Absolutely.
Right? That there's such a synergy that's happening in Spartanburg right now that I think makes it fun to be part of something spectacular.
Right. Katherine, you are a wonderful person, and you have a beautiful mind, and you've done so many great things.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you being on the podcast today. And I look forward to the growth that's coming with One Spartanburg Inc. and Katherine O'Neill. So
thank you. I'm very honored. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's it. So thank you so much. Please listen in on the Southbound Podcast, stories from influential people who are shaping the South.